Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Bumpy Narrow Road. I'm Kellen Tichenor, and in this podcast, we discuss the ups and downs, the struggles and issues that come with trying to live a more Christ-centered, Christ-like life. Today, we are discussing morality. What makes something good or bad, right or wrong? Can people make their own morality, or is morality objective? Are there things that are inherently good or bad? And what gives you the right to tell other people what they should or should not do? We'll be answering those questions and more today on the Bumpy Narrow Road. So let's start off with defining morality so that we know what we're dealing with here. So the definition of morality is principles concerning the distinctions between right and wrong or good and bad behavior. So this leads to other questions like, well, what is right and wrong? What is good and bad behavior? And who or what gets to make that determination of what's good and bad? And are there different variations of morality? So let's start with that one. Let's start with, are there different versions of it? And I would say mostly no, and in very, very few circumstances, yes. And the reason I say that is because that would involve things that don't affect other people, which we'll get into in a little bit. And there are very, very few things that we do that don't affect the people around us or affect our family in some shape or form. The second instance would be, if you're a Christian, things that maybe the Bible doesn't specifically cover. So what it does is, as a Christian, you turn to the Bible and you gain some wisdom from that, and you try to maybe pray about certain things, about what you should do in certain situations, but there's no cut and dry direction on that. So that leaves some discussion back and forth. So one of the things I talked about on social media was this thing called the trolley problem. And I asked some of you what you would do in this certain circumstance. And I got some good feedback, and I had some good discussions with people on that. But let me explain the main trolley problem first, and then I actually had kind of my own version of that. So the trolley problem is this. You have a runaway train. It's going down a track. And there is a person that's on the train tracks that if you let the train go in that direction, that person is going to get run over and die. Now, you also have someone on the train, and if you are to divert the train away from that track, that is going to go off the rails, and that person will die. So you're having to make a determination of who gets to live and who gets to die. So what I said is, if this was an actual situation, and that's really what I'm concerned about, is not hypotheticals that are staying hypotheticals, but how does it apply to real life? And in that situation, the only thing that I could think to do would be to divert the train so that the first person doesn't die, and then do everything I can to stop the train, or to try to get the person off the train, or do whatever I can to save the person's life that's on the train as well. Because the main thing is trying to preserve innocent life. Now, where I got into a bit of a discussion with other people, and where I was really trying to figure out in my own mind, was a situation where we bring in the existence of evil. So let's say that there is someone that's on the track who is a known person who does evil. They're not a good person. Let's say they're a serial killer, something to that effect. And then you have someone on the train, let's say a child. Now, if you let the train go, the person on the train tracks is going to die, and the child on the train is going to live. And obviously, if you divert it, the serial killer or evil person on the tracks is going to live, and there's a much greater chance that the child on the train, no matter what you do, is going to die or get severely injured. Now, my initial reaction to that is, of course, let the train go. Kill the person that's on the track to save the child's life that's on the track. Now, the reason that it gets muddy in this circumstance is because of the fact that in God's eyes, we are all equal. None of us, even when we sin, our sins are equal, and nobody is above another person. So I'm supposed to hold those two lives equally. But I know that in my situation, I would look at the life of the child, the more innocent life, I guess, and I would preserve that over the life of someone who is evil and an adult, and that kind of adds an extra layer to it. But those types of situations are not so clear, cut, and dry. They're a little bit more based on opinion, but those are very, very few and far between. So what I got into a discussion with people a lot is this idea of objective morality. So this is the question. Can people make their own morality. And the thing is that systems of morality, they have to have some sort of hierarchy. Some things are worse than others, and some things are better than others. So even if you want to say, I'm not taking my morality from the Bible, I'm going to make my own morality, you're still going to put certain things as better than other things. You're going to say that, okay, killing a person is worse than slapping a person, for instance. And if there's a hierarchy, that means that there must be some sort of pinnacle of perfection. So if some things are worse and some things are not as bad and some things are better than that, then there has to be, at some point, you get to the top of that pinnacle where there's perfection. And that pinnacle of perfection would be something that is morally perfect. And we as people are all flawed. We as people, we all sin. We all mess up. So we really aren't qualified to determine what is perfect and good because we're pulling from an imperfect source. The only thing that can do that would be something that is absolutely good and perfect, which would be God. And the problem is, if everybody makes up their own rules, there are no rules. It'd be like playing Uno, but you decide that whatever card you put down, you get to decide what it means. It doesn't matter what the card actually is. You just get to decide what it means when you put it down. There's no objective to the game. There's no rules for the game. There's no way of playing the game because it doesn't make any sense. It's just a matter of opinion from person to person, and there are no rules. So I would argue that there are things that are just inherently good or inherently bad. And this is a discussion that I got in with some people because, yes, we can have general rules across the board that give parameters on how people should treat each other if things are good and bad. But if you don't have that, if you say, well, nothing is actually inherently good, nothing is actually inherently bad, then at best, we could set up rules for maybe small groups of people in society who might happen to agree with each other. And that's what some people who say that morality is not objective is a subjective thing. It's a creation of society. That's their argument, is that people in society just kind of make up their own rules depending on who's around them. So fine, if you say that that's the case, then people should be able to make up their own rules, but then you would not be able to judge the morality of any other society. You could not say that anybody else is doing anything wrong over there because that's simply their version of what is right and what is wrong. So it got me thinking about, what are some things that maybe people could just say, okay, this is universally wrong? And the first thing that comes to my mind, of course, is murder, the killing of innocent. And I think, okay, well, everybody knows that murder is bad. But do they? You look at things like abortions. There's a humongous division in society over that. It's the killing of something that is innocent. It's you're ending a life. You're taking something that's alive, that is sinless, that is innocent, and you're making it unalive. So you're killing something that's innocent. You also look at people are okay, and I'm certainly not saying all people, and I'm certainly not saying that people who aren't Christians believe this, but there are a lot of people out there who believe that if you strongly disagree with somebody, that you should be able to murder them. I mean, you look at this, obviously the most recent is Charlie Kirk, but you also look at Luigi Mangione and how people cheered him for killing someone in broad daylight, and you have people that are out there protesting and saying free Luigi when he murdered somebody in the street. You can say that, okay, the United Healthcare CEO, you could say he was a bad person, he was an immoral person. You're still saying that there is a reason to murder someone. So I got to thinking, okay, well, if murder isn't one of those things, well, rape must be something that is universally wrong. And I would say for the most part, yes, people see rape as universally wrong, unless it happens to people that we view as bad. I mean, you look at pre-Civil War slaves. It was very widespread during that time for slave masters to rape their slaves. And that was completely seen as morally fine. And it was, ubiquitous in society for slave owners. There was no problem with it. They wouldn't press charges if they raped their slave and the slave even got pregnant. There's absolutely no problem with that. You even look at, you look at what happened with Hamas. I mean, on October 7th, there was all kinds of rape. And you have people that are saying, well, they kind of deserved it. Same thing, the Nazis thought that the Jews deserved it during the Holocaust. So there is this excuse that people can create if they can say, well, if they're bad, it no longer becomes wrong. It becomes something that is excused. And that doesn't mean that things are not inherently evil, because in all of those cases, they occurred because there were evil ideas that prevailed over society to give a false justification for those evil actions. And that doesn't mean that they weren't evil. It just means that people created justifications for them because they didn't have that objective moral framework. And you can look at Isaiah 5:20, and this is a warning to those types of that type of thought and that type of behavior. It says, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter." And then here's another thing I heard was, what gives you the right to tell other people what's right and wrong? And that's what I've heard. Why do I get to say that murder is wrong? Why do I get to say that certain things are wrong? Am I better than everybody else that I get to do this? And what gives me the right? Absolutely nothing. Again, I'm a flawed person. I have no right to be able to make morality for anybody or make these random moral rules based off what I think. But God does. Flawed people don't get to make morality, but God is perfect, and so he can. Romans 1:18-19 says, "The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all godlessness and wickedness of people, who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them." So it's something that is ingrained in us. It's something that is written on our hearts. It's something that is there, and that's why even when you have people all across different societies who maybe don't take the 10 Commandments and don't take the Bible for their morality, there's a reason why everybody can generally agree that a lot of things are wrong, and that's because it is written on our hearts by God. But you look at examples of Nazi Germany, for instance. This is probably the easiest example of this thing of what gives you the right to tell other people what they can and cannot do. So in that instance, you had an entire society of people who thought that what they were doing was actually morally virtuous, that the genocide, that the killing of all those people, they thought in their minds that there was not only nothing morally wrong with that, but they thought that they were actually doing something good. I believe that they knew absolutely that it was wrong in their hearts, but there was this justification and there was this excuses that they made up that said, you know what, we know this is evil, but there's an excuse for doing it. And that's why we have things like the Geneva Conventions. I mean, the Geneva Conventions are because there is this belief that there is some sort of universal truth about right and wrong that can be applied to other societies, even at times of war. And that will tell you that people do believe in some sort of objective morality because, again, if you didn't have that, if there was nothing that was objective that you could say that is above everything and everyone that we would be able to pull our morality from, then you would not be able to look at Nazi Germany and say, that's a wrong thing to do. You would only be able to look at them and say, well, okay, that's their truth. That's what they believe. They believe they're doing the right thing. So who am I to say that they can't do what they're doing? Who am I to say they can't gas people? I mean, they believe it's the right thing to do, and that's the important thing. That's crazy. That's an absolutely insane perspective to have, that people should have their own version of morality. And I'm sorry, you can't say, well, we're going to have our own version of morality, but everybody is moral. People are not moral. People are evil. I mean, you can look through history. People are bad. And without a moral structure, without God there, without some without God, they're saying that this is the pinnacle of what you need to be reaching for. People do very, very evil things. I mean, you know what else you can't condemn? If you want to say that if you want to say you don't believe in objective morality, you can't condemn slavery then. Because if you truly believe that all ideas of morality are created equal and that you can't really tell anybody else what's right and wrong, then you can't say that slavery is wrong. And that's a funny thing, because you have people today that will say people should be able to create their own morality, but then we'll also look back at slavery and say that they want to condemn everybody that was in society during that time because they owned slaves. So there's this double standard there where I get to make my own morality whatever I want, but I also get to impose it on everybody else and say that everybody else in the whole world is wrong for not believing what I believe. I'm sorry, if you get to make up your own morality, then other people get to make up their own morality. And when that happens, there is no morality. So what's the bottom line? If you believe that morality is simply a construct of society, then you cannot condemn any other behavior by other societies. Things like genocide, rape, torture, and even slavery would simply be equal moral actions, and you would have no right to tell them otherwise. After all, it's their truth. This is, of course, ridiculous. There is, in fact, good and evil, things that are virtuous and things that are destructive. It is the way the world was created, and it's why God gave us the 10 Commandments to begin with, to reveal to us how the world is designed to work, and to give us clear guidelines on how we should aspire to live our lives. Then he sent his son Jesus and showed us what living that way looks like, to give even more clarity on how we are to live and interact with God and with each other, and to overcome evil with perfect goodness. We should be thankful that God the Father gave us these directions through his word, that Jesus gave us an example of how to live them out while he was here on earth, and that the Holy Spirit guides us in these things from within every day of our lives. Well, that's it for today. Thank you all so much for watching and listening, and I'll see you next week. God bless.